Quest Diagnostics Training Center on Monday, August the 2nd, as we welcome you to the Giants Training Camp Report presented by Investors Bank. Week number 2 of training camp for the New York Giants. Bob Papa along with Super Bowl champion Shaun O'Hara. And Shaun, first and foremost, the players greeted to some nice mild conditions today for this practice on Monday.
Oh, yeah, beautiful day. All offensive linemen were always worried about the sweat factor. The sweat factor today, minimal, although there is like a 2 to 3 club win, Bob.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, you know, you take a look at this Giants team and you get through that first week of practice from personal experience. When you get into week number 2, and this is the ramp up, they're going to eventually put pads on this week. What were some of the things that you were looking for individually for you as a player as far as marking where your progress was?
Yeah, great question. I think the first week, and really when I was showing up to training camp, we would have a 3-day acclimatization period, and a lot of it was you want to see where everybody's conditioning is at. You want everybody to kind of get their feet up underneath them, and I think the one thing you have to do as a team, you got to practice smart. So when you're doing drills right now without pads on and early on in camp, you want to find out how do we get our balance, how do we work well together, make sure nobody's on the ground. So it's kind of like getting your sea legs after being out on a boat for a while. Once you get back on the ground, get work. But for us offensive linemen, Bob, it was all about hands. So you want the hand placement. You don't have shoulder pads on, so you're not really grinding on anybody. You're not lowering into anybody. It's not collisions.
I want to ask you about number 77, Joe Looney, who has spent time with the Cowboys. The Giants just signed him this week. You see Pat Flaherty, your former offensive line coach, just walking through some things with him. What about Looney as a player and what he brings to the Giants?
Yeah, Joe filled in really nicely when their center, Travis Frederick, got diagnosed with that autoimmune disease, and he filled in, and I thought he played really well. So he's really stout, really physical, and you could tell, I mean, there's Nick Gates right there, 65. Joe Looney is clearly, you know, a much bigger guy, so he's in the run game, extremely stout. I think mentally, because he played guard, he played center, he understands concepts. He did a great job, I thought, when he filled in at center for the Dallas Cowboys at recognizing the defense and understanding what they're trying to do to you. So you see him right now. Their centers are working on back blocks right here. You mentioned Pat Flaherty, flats. He's taking the snap right now, and I'm just so glad he can get out of the way. He's so old now. You worry about his footwork. But this back block right here, Bob, this is, say you're running 36 power. So the left guard is pulling to the right. As a center, you have to block back on the nose guard, and now they're going to switch it. So now this would be 37 power. He's going to block to the right. So it's all about getting your footwork down. And then, of course, now you're snapping with the right hand and you're moving to the right. So your left hand has to be really quick and really strong.
Talk about the foot placement here, because you talk a lot about getting that first punch, but every step is literally choreographed here.
It is, because you can't step on your guard. You've got guards on both sides, and as you're blocking back, that's why you always do so many walkthroughs as an offensive line, because you need to know what your guard's footwork is so that you don't trip him up if he's trying to pull, and vice versa. If your center is trying to help you in a combination block, you don't want to be stepping on toes. Here's Andrew Thomas right here, coming into his second year at left tackle. I thought I saw great strides last year, Bob, from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. He really started to calm down with his feet. He's so athletic. I thought he got in trouble sometimes with oversetting last year, Bob, and so I thought the second half of the season, he did a much better job of that.
So what's being explained right here?
So you can see the coach right now, what he's talking about is keep that hip square. As a left tackle, you want to try, as you kick slide, you want to stay as square to the line of scrimmage as possible without opening your hips, because as soon as you open your hips, that makes it what we call a soft shoulder. Now you can't redirect the edge rusher, and it gives them a softer circle to run against. Now that's Matt Parrott, the right tackle, number 74, working the same thing, is trying to stay square to the line of scrimmage and not open your hips and open up the gates.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, watching the tackles, and Matt Parrott, who is a guy that flashed a lot for the Giants last year. I mean, there were a lot of things that you saw. Now we're looking at Will Hernandez, number 71, who's working on that right side and having to make that adjustment going from the left side to the right side. But, there were a lot of things from some of the young guys that were very positive last year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Matt Parrott, I thought, the one thing when the Giants drafted him, they said, listen, this guy's a little bit of a long-term guy. We want him to get stronger. I was impressed with how strong he played. And I think when you look at him now, he looks even thicker. The big thing with him is he's got such long arms, and the punch is something you really have to work at. If you're a grabber, you could sometimes kind of get top heavy and then you stop your feet, and that's where you get in trouble. So, we're seeing that's Matt Parrott, number 74, and Nate Solder, number 76, who opted out last year due to COVID, and now he's moving from left tackle to right tackle. So for Matt Parrott, you've got a veteran guy who's played a ton of football in the NFL, and Nate Solder, and a really good dude that's going to be sharing knowledge with you, sharing techniques, sharing different insights as to how to combat some of these speed rushers.
One of the things that we saw, and Joe Judge has talked about it, we've seen it with the defensive linemen, offensive line, mandatory during training camp to wear the knee braces.
Yeah.
Is you think that's something that is beneficial for players?
I think it is. We saw Shane Lemieux go down early in camp, and I think that's one of the reason why you wear those is because inevitably, just like I talked about the first couple of days in training camp, you're working together. You're figuring out how to practice together, offense and defense. There's bodies on the floor. Sometimes guys fall down. So those knee braces are to prevent somebody falling on your legs, on your knees, and preventing any ACL injuries. So no doubt they are preventative. And I think when you're not wearing pads right away, the first few days of practice, you just have to get used to them. Your body's got to get used to them. You kind of have to break them in.
Get a look at Nate Solder there. You mentioned coming back. Talk about good teammate, good attitude. Here's a guy that was a starting left tackle. He was an outstanding player. He was a big free agent signing by the Giants. Opted out last year. Everybody knows the backstory to all of that. But talk about being a good teammate. Said, hey, listen, I'm here to contribute. Right side, left side, whatever they need me to do. Now, what are they doing here?
Yeah, so this is, again, as a tackle, your pass set is, that's how you make your money, and so it has to be routine. You can't think about it. So what they're doing right now is they have a resistance band right now. So basically, this is making it hard for them to push back. So this is all strengthening the right leg right there. So that was a left tackle right there, and your up foot. All right, right here, Nate Solder, his up foot is his left leg. So now this is strengthening the left quad as you push back and your kick slide. And then now when you take the band off, now you fly out of there. So it's all about the resistance training for the kick slide. And then after doing it with resistance, Bob, once you take it off, now all of a sudden, man, you feel like you're just flying back there, gliding back there. Now we see reverse.
Now they're doing the reverse. So what is this? What is this building?
So just like in the offseason, you train with these resistance bands. This is making your feet move faster than you're used to. So it's over speed, and by pulling while you're sliding, now all of a sudden, if your feet don't move and keep up with it, now you're going to fall. So it's teaching you to accelerate the feet and to be even quicker as you set.
Matt Parrott again working with Nate Solder, and you mentioned it. What a luxury for the second-year offensive lineman to have a guy like Solder in his ear constantly.
Yeah, and listen, I think I would, if I had to place a gentleman's wager, I would say Nate Solder ends up starting week one. I just feel like he has some good football left in him. I feel like he's extremely physical. He's got really long arms, really good hands, and good footwork, and I think Matt Parrott can really give them stability and depth. And then, I would absolutely think that they would start working him in, because eventually Matt Parrott is going to be the right tackle for the Giants. But for Nate Solder, I think his mindset, and also taking a year off from football, I think he has a totally different perspective, which is probably refreshing for both him and the other offensive linemen.
Well, it's also a chance for his body to reset a little bit, because Solder dealt with injuries in the 2019 season and kind of played through some things. And, when you have as many miles as he has under him, you give your body a chance to reset a little bit and freshen up.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, physically reset, mentally reset, kind of emotionally reset and recharge. And, I'll say this, Bob, I feel like on a whole, the offensive line, the team itself, it feels like a different training camp than it was last year this time. Last year was a little bit heavier. So, there's definitely a lot more smiles. And, of course, nobody's happier than that guy right there, Daniel Jones, because he's throwing to that new guy, Kenny Golladay. So there's a nice connection right there, Bob.
Little play action pass there, and the only way the play action pass works is if you're able to get a good running game going, so that teams will respect that play action, and obviously the Giants are hoping to have Saquon Barkley, and what those guys do up front is going to be a big factor in all of this.
Yeah, big playability, no doubt about it. And now you get a look at Mike Glennon, who the Giants signed this offseason, 6'7". All right, they call him Big Mike right there. And there's that little play action, the shotgun play action. Mike Glennon's got a big arm, and you know what we're seeing right here. This is timing. It's all about, all right, every receiver runs that crossing route differently. Everybody comes out of their break differently. It has different speed. So that's why you run these reps and you run these route concepts on air just to get that timing down.
You know, for a couple of days so far here in training camp in East Rutherford, New Jersey, we have had some windy conditions. And let's face it, when MetLife Stadium was built and opened up in 2010, the Giants used to practice in Giant Stadium. Now they're in what was part of the parking lot of the old Giant Stadium. I would think, you know, these windy conditions are not the worst thing in the world, because you're going to face that in that building during the season.
Yeah, it's great practice, great opportunity to battle the elements and work for it. And, you know, it's funny when you think about windy conditions, people always just automatically think about the quarterback and throwing the football. But when you're a receiver and that ball is moving, that makes it tough too. So they have to get adjusted to it just as much as the quarterback. I will say this, Daniel Jones throws one of the tightest spirals in the NFL right now. And, you know, look, I love Eli to death, but there were some wobblers. Daniel Jones, when you watch him throw, he does not throw many ducks. He throws a very tight spiral, which will cut through the wind on any day.
Eli may come down from his office upstairs and give you a little heat. Eli
doesn't know where his office is yet.
All right, we're going to look at James Bradbury and Galladay, and nice move there by Galladay to get inside. The pass goes to Sterling Shepard. You know, how important is it? Galladay's new with the Giants, getting familiar with this program, with Jason Garrett's playbook. But every day you're getting to go to work against a guy like Bradbury, who had a spectacular season last year. It's got to make you better.
Absolutely. I mean, that was great footage right there of showing how the Giants are getting better right now. That's iron sharpening iron. James Bradbury versus Kenny Galladay. You saw Bradbury jam with the left hand right at the line of scrimmage. That's press coverage, a little bump and run. But you saw the release by Galladay. That jam did not affect him at all. He was still able to handle the physical aspect and get open.
All right, there's Sterling Shepard. I know for Giant fans, he's not wearing 87 anymore. You know, with the new rules as far as numbers are concerned, the most senior member of the Giants wearing number 3. And, you know, you look at this complement of receivers, and if Shepard can stay healthy, he could do a lot of damage for this football team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you see Joe Judge coaching him up right there. You know, I don't think there's not a position that Coach Judge doesn't have the opportunity to give input on. But yeah, certainly different seeing him in a number 3 jersey, but the health has just been the biggest thing. Sterling in the slot, I mean, he is so competitive. Every time you throw him the football, he is going to fight for it. He has a really good catch radius, and he's certainly been an explosive player. So they need to find a way to get some more out of him. And I think now you put him in the slot next to Kenny Galladay, I think that's a pretty explosive tandem.
There is a number 87 on the Giants. That is Damian Willis, a wide receiver in his second year out of Troy, signed as a free agent this year. So the number still lives with the New York Giants, but it's no longer Sterling Shepard's.
There you see number 30, Corey Clement. Looks like they just checked down the football to him. You know, that's going to be something to watch this training camp too, Bob. Devontae Booker and Corey Clement, you know, obviously with Saquon coming off of the ACL, you know, you're going to need to have that third down back because Deion Lewis is not here.
You saw number 41 standing there in the background. That is Alfred Morris, who the Giants officially signed today, the veteran running back in his 9th year out of Florida Atlantic. You know, did nice things for the Giants, understands the playbook, and it's a good security blanket to have.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was with Jason Garrett down in Dallas even before this stop. He knows this offense extremely well, and he will get acclimated right onto the field as soon as he's physically ready. He's been here for a few days, I think, getting into the COVID protocol. But you mentioned last year providing some production. He had that 2-touchdown game against Seattle in that big win. Had a receiving touchdown, the first of his career. I think he's going to provide some nice veteran depth.
All right, John Ross, former first-round pick of the Bengals. So far, Giants head coach Joe Judge has been very excited about Ross's work ethic and what he's done on the field. And you could just see the speed right there. He was a burner coming out of college, and obviously he's dealt with a bunch of injuries, but, it was one of those kick the tires kind of signings. It's a low impact signing for the Giants, and if this player can stay healthy and get near what his upside is, it makes this receiving group even that much more dangerous.
Yeah, Bob, low risk, high reward with him. He just has struggled to stay on the field, like you mentioned, but you could see on that route the suddenness, the acceleration, the start and stop. When the Giants drafted Kadarius Toney, I had my first thought was, well, that may take some reps away from John Ross, but he certainly is an intriguing aspect of when you look at the wide receivers and their speed, their ability to get in and out of breaks. He certainly has all of that, along with some acceleration.
Yeah, look, it's a crowded position group when everybody's healthy, but from your long career in the National Football League, not every player is starting or playing and available in all 16 games. There are going to be days where weeks where guys are nicked up and they can't go, and you're only as good as the bottom of your roster in the National Football League. And that was something that was very indicative of your championship team in 2007 and the 2011 team. Was roster depth is one of the reasons why you guys were able to hoist the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you constantly need people to step up due to injury, but also even now with the COVID protocols, you could lose 2 receivers on a Friday due to close contact. So having that list and having the COVID list and the larger kind of practice squad roster, I think that really helps, and that could certainly help a guy like John Ross or some of these other receivers that are battling for spots.
Shaun, I want to take you back to earlier in your career as Joe Judge is checking things out. People remember you as a Super Bowl winning center for the Giants and a guy who made it to the Pro Bowl. A lot of people don't realize that you went undrafted out of Rutgers and you signed with Cleveland as a free agent. What was it like the first week or so in camp when, there was no real skin in the game as far as the organization and you were concerned?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when you go into a training camp as an undrafted guy, you're going to get very limited reps, very, very limited opportunities. And, the one thing that I just knew that I couldn't do was I couldn't be myself. If I was going to get 4 reps in that practice, I had to know exactly what I was doing on all 4 reps. I could not have a mental error. And, that's the challenge when you're an undrafted guy or when you're fighting to make the team. You feel like every single rep is so important. And look, physically, everybody knows that, the other guy wins sometimes, but mentally you just can't ever give up those reps for free. But I think the other thing is I knew I had to contribute special teams. If you're trying to fight for a roster spot, if you're an undrafted guy, try to find something else to do aside from the original position that you can contribute to the team and provide some value.
Giants right now have number 73, Zach Fulton, who's a veteran guy out of Tennessee who's played a lot in the National Football League. They have him as the left guard. Hernandez is in at the right guard spot. And the Giants signing Joe Looney, they've added a lot of depth, some veteran depth on the inside. Obviously, Joe Judge revealed to the media last week that, everything as far as Lemieux is concerned, the worst case scenarios have been avoided. But they certainly have strengthened from an experience level this offensive line where they have some choices here as far as the rotation is concerned. And I like the fact that they're keeping Hernandez on the right side rather than flopping him over left to let him get used to playing the right side.
Yeah, no doubt. Will Hernandez needs, as many pass sets and reps as he can get at that right guard spot because it is different. Even though he has played left guard last year, it's a little bit different mentally, and you have to do the mental gymnastics when you break the huddle to remind yourself, hey, I'm on the right side, and I don't have the slide. But you mentioned Zach Fulton, number 73 right there. If you're Nick Gates right now, you got 650 pounds of beef on either side of you combined. So it definitely gives this offensive line a totally different look up front, much stouter with Will Hernandez and Zach Fulton in there at left guard. But I think Shane is probably a little bit more of a puller, or a little more athletic on the second level. But no doubt this offensive line, the depth, the quality as well is light years ahead of where they were last year.
I want to go back to Nick Gates. Right now they have the second unit in on the offensive line, but Nick Gates had never played center, and last year he wins the starting center job for the New York Giants. What's your assessment of Gates, what you saw out of him last year, and where he needs to improve upon in 2021? Because he's certainly tough as nails.
Yeah, great question about Nick Gates. And you were talking about me coming in as an undrafted free agent. He did the same thing, and he also was a left tackle in college. So it's definitely a big transition when you're going from being outside in space as a tackle to inside as center. Two things that are completely different from being out at a tackle. Number one, you have to snap the football. And then number two, everything is right on top of you. So you're so much closer to the action. You really have to be good with your hands. And that's where I saw growth from Nick Gates during the second half of the season. I thought he was much better with his hands, getting his left hand up quicker on the defender, keeping his hand inside. He was more aware. I thought it took a little while for both he and Daniel Jones to be on the same page from a protection standpoint. It took them a little while to understand the concept of, okay, if the linebackers flip-flop on one side, or if we're sliding to a will linebacker and somebody else comes off the edge, we can go ahead and continue to slide and pick that up. And I think that's something that you're going to see continued growth as we see, it looks like Joe Looney in at center right now.
Yeah, and not to make any excuses, your production and your record and everything else is what it is. But when you think about, Daniel Jones dealing with COVID and all the protocols and everything virtual last year, having to learn a new offense, and you couple that with Nick Gates, who had never played center before, and under that same environment, it's only natural that you were going to have some of those gaps that have to be tightened up this year.
Yeah, and when you add to the fact that it was all virtual, it was Zooms. It wasn't in-person quarterback-center exchange, hey, are you seeing this? Let's draw it up together. So that definitely made it a challenge. I think they will both be much more comfortable and much more confident in Jason Garrett's second year of this offense.
All right, a lot of fun, Shaun, taking Giants fans sort of inside the lines, and Shaun giving you a breakdown of the offensive line for the New York Giants and what some of these drills are that you'll see on TV. A lot of fun, buddy. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Bobby.
All right, so for Shaun O'Hara and our entire crew, we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Giants Training Camp Report, brought to you by Investors Bank.